Hello guys, welcome to another session of Business Data Science with Delali. And today I want to talk about a very important topic of our time, LLM evaluation or large language models evaluation. Okay, I think in my previous video I explained what large language models are, why they are important, why they are so popular, why almost everyone is talking about large language models. But look, there is something very important that we all need to understand about large language models, because guess what? If these models are built, they are not perfect models, okay? So we must evaluate them and understand that what they are doing is what we actually expect them to do, okay? And so large language model evaluation is actually a process of testing and measuring how well large language models perform in real world situations. Okay, so let me put it there for you. Large language model evaluation is the process of testing and measuring how well large language models perform in real world situations. Okay, now why do we need large language model evaluation or LLM evals? Well, we need them because every model is supposed to perform a task, and so we have to perform some sort of analysis and evaluation to ensure that this model is performing the task that it is actually asked to do. Large language models actually hallucinate. So if you use ChatGPT, for example, you can ask ChatGPT something and ChatGPT will confidently give you some very wrong answers. Okay, so that's what we call hallucination. So they hallucinate. Sometimes they don't give accurate responses. Sometimes they are not safe. Sometimes they are biased. Okay, so by actually evaluating these models, you will understand if the answers that they are giving, if it's a chatbot, is accurate. You understand if they are actually just hallucinating. You understand if their answers are biased, if their answers are not safe. Okay, and large language models are very broad. Okay, so conversational systems like chatbots are just one aspect of large language models. We have large language models that are used for what? Translations. So if you are translating, let's say, from French to English, how can you evaluate and ensure that the translations are accurate? Okay, large language models are also used for summarization. So you can give a prompt for the system to summarize for you set of documents. So how do you evaluate that summarization makes sense before you completely trust it? Okay, all of those are part of what? Large language model evaluation. So many times when we are talking about large language model evaluation, we confuse that with the actual large language model evaluation versus what I call the large language model system evaluation. Okay, so they are two different things. Okay, the LLM evaluation is actually evaluating how well the model itself is performing. Okay, so that is the LLM evaluation. Now, the LLM system evaluation is actually more about the entire system that you've built, the entire AI system. How is that whole system performing? So that includes the system integration, that includes the prompt, how the prompts are working, that includes how the prompts are pulling the right information in answering the question. So how the entire full system is working. So that is the system evaluation or the LLM system evaluation. Okay, so get the difference. So this video, again, we don't like to go too technical in this video, but we like to give you the basis and the foundations so that you can actually understand what these things are. And if you want to go further, of course, we will help you with some links to go further. Okay, so LLM evaluation is very important, and we would like you to ensure that you understand these things. And if you are just an end user of AI models, make sure that these things are very well evaluated. Okay, and you must evaluate the actual model, LLM, large language model, as well as the full system evaluation. All of these things are very, very important. Okay, so why are LLM evaluations very hard to do in practice. Okay, we all know that these chatbots that are built, we need to evaluate them. These AI systems that are doing all sort of things like summarization, content generation, basically question answering, they are doing translations. We need to evaluate them. But why are they so hard to evaluate? Okay, so let me give you some 5 reasons why large language models are very hard to evaluate and how to actually think about doing them. Okay, number 1, large language models are very complex in size. Okay, they are very complex and they are very huge. We are talking about billions of parameters. So in order to actually evaluate them, and you have to run them and see how they are working, come on man, you have to actually have enough computational space to actually evaluate all of these things. So they are massive. Okay, you need a lot of massive resources. So just because of how complex they are, okay, because of all the big parameters or big size of parameters that they have, like billions of parameters, it is generally very difficult, and these parameters are so many that evaluating them is very hard. Look, if you understand regression, okay, the old school statistical modeling, how do you evaluate regression models? You have the actual, and then you have your predictions, and then you just like subtract the actual and the prediction, and then you get some error. You calculate some mean square error, and then there you go. You are already evaluating, right? Guess what? That type of evaluation is very simple because it's very numeric, right? But you also have like 5-6 parameters. But here you have billions of parameters. So by just the sheer nature of the complexity, it is very, very difficult to evaluate. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is because of the subjectivity in evaluating large language models. Okay, because these are about language. Okay, large language model clearly is about language, and language is very subjective, it's very nuanced. Okay, how I say something as someone living in the United States but with a clear Ghanaian accent is different from someone in Nigeria, how they will understand something, or someone in London, how they will understand things, right? And how they speak. And so just because this is about language that is very nuanced and is non-numerical, it is very, very difficult to evaluate, and making sure that what the output that these language models are producing are accurate. Okay, it's not very black and white. It's not numeric. If it's numeric, you have the actual and you have your prediction in your data, and then you can easily validate. Okay, so that's the other reason why it is actually very tricky to evaluate. And so sometimes you have situations where LLM is actually failing. We call it soft failures. Okay, even though it's not really right, but because of the language, you can actually say it's right, or vice versa, it's not really wrong, but because of the language, it may be wrong. Okay, so that's the second reason. Number 3 is because it is about language, you often need human in the loop. You need humans to read the output. Okay, even if it's content generation in terms of like images, because some LLMs are now multimodal. They are generating images. Like, you need human in the loop to actually understand the output very well and tell us if this output is what is expected versus not. But guess what? Having human in the loop is very expensive, it's very labor intensive, it's hard to compute the ground truth so that you can compare your LLM output to the ground truth. Okay, so that's another reason why evaluating LLMs are actually very hard. Okay, and number 4, lack of standard metrics. In classical machine learning model, like in regression, in classification, you have several standardized metrics. Okay, so metrics like mean square error, metrics like understanding the residuals, doing variance on residuals. You have things like basically recall, you have precision, you have F-score, F1 score. You have a lot of standardized metrics that you can use in evaluating classical machine learning model. But when it comes to large language models, truly there are not a lot of standardized metrics. There are some of them, but you can actually argue that those metrics are actually not even well standardized. So the lack of standardized metrics actually also make it hard to actually evaluate large language models. Another reason why it is really tricky to evaluate large language models is the diverse nature of their application. Okay, in fact, large language models can be used to do several things: for translations, for summarization, for question answering. They can do several things for content generation. They can write different type of things. You can customize them for different kinds of use cases, and so it is actually very hard because each person's use case is so different, and so it is hard to come up with a generic type of evaluation. Okay, so far we've discussed 5 reasons why it is very difficult to evaluate large language models. Okay, but whether or not it's very difficult, it's something that's very necessary. Okay, so let's talk about some of the ways to actually go about evaluating large language models. And today we are just going to introduce a few ways, and then in the next video I will talk more more in detail how to go about doing these evaluations. Okay, there are many ways of evaluating large language models. Okay, and so I am coming up with what I call 3 lenses. Okay, lenses through which you can evaluate large language models. 3 lenses. Okay, lens number 1 is what I call offline versus online evaluation. So you can evaluate your large language model offline, that is when they are not in deployment, versus online when they are in deployment. So that's one way, and again I will go into the details of this later. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you can evaluate your large language models through a statistical means or through human in the loop, or what we call manual evaluation, or using LLM as a judge. Okay, so that's another lens or through which you can evaluate large language models. Okay, and then the third one is what I call evaluating based on the aspects of model performance. Okay, so because each model have different aspects by which they need to perform, so you can actually position your evaluation by looking at the different aspects of model performance. So if you think about these 3 methods, you realize that these methods can be nested. Okay, and in any case, one single method of evaluation is not enough. You need to do multiple ways. Okay, just because of how nuanced language models are. Okay, so imagine you can have online versus offline, and then under online you can have things like statistical versus human versus LLM as a judge, and then you can also have offline, and then under offline you also have different methods within that. So it can really be nested, but this is what I will talk about in our next video. So please keep watching, and talk to you later. Bye bye.